Hey, what's happening, guys? This is Aaron Luttrull and Greg Keith.
What's going on?
With the Aaron Advantage team. We are going live today at a different time to try to see when we can best get with you guys and have the opportunity. We're messing with the lighting and stuff. Usually it's dark outside, so we've never done this with light behind us before.
And our smiles have gotten brighter.
But hey, we actually checked it out, and the data is showing us that there are more people who are live and online during the day at this time. So we thought we'd go live right now because we want to be able to answer your questions live. So this is year 2 for everybody's favorite topic in real estate, haunted houses. So last year I talked a little bit about haunted houses, and I think it might have been episode number 1 of Real Talk Real Estate. So we're going to answer some questions that you might have on what you have to disclose, maybe what you need to know. But first, we're going to let Greg tell us a little bit of a story about his haunted house experience. I'm on the keys today, so if you've got your questions, comments down below. I'll be checking it out, and I'll just let Greg take it away, and we'll go from there.
First of all, happy episode 43. Let's give it up for 43. All right, so when I first bought my house, this is my very first house. It was on the east side of Evansville, and for obvious reasons, I cannot disclose the address. But went through the closing. Everything was great. It was a smooth transaction, and I'll never forget meeting the neighbor for the first time. We got to talking, and the neighbor said, "It's a real shame how all this happened." I was like, "What are you talking about?" And I kind of caught him in his steps. He's like, "Oh, you don't know, do you?" And I said, "No, but I'm hoping that you'll tell me now." Long story short, there was a misfortunate event that happened in the house prior to it closing. Again, for details and for, what's the word I'm thinking of? Privacy issues. I can't tell you exactly what happened, but there was an unfortunate event that happened in the house that would psychologically affect my buying. So this happened after the fact, and like every person would have done, I frantically called my realtor and asked him what could we do, because I didn't want to sleep there. Like literally, the first night I slept there and we're trying to get answers, my eyes were wide open the entire night. We're moving over this way.
We're trying to fix the lighting for you guys.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
All right.
Much better. Darren, thank you for the heads up. That looks a lot better.
So long story short, because I didn't ask the right questions beforehand, there was nothing that can be done. And that's what we're going to teach you guys today is what are the questions and how to ask them, because you have to ask them directly. You cannot just jump around and beat around the bush, but there's a certain way you have to ask these questions in order for that to get disclosed prior to a closing.
Yeah.
Okay? So Aaron, let's start with so let's say we go into a house. Let's say it's a 1915 two-story. It's kind of got that creepy vibe about it.
that always happens.
Yeah. All right. Can I ask you, Aaron? Is there anything that's happened in this house that would cause it to be creepy? Could you answer that? How would you answer that?
So the truth of the matter is, it depends on how you've been instructed by the seller on how you want to answer that. Psychological impacts in the state of Indiana are different specifically even from other states. In some states you have to disclose if somebody's been murdered in the house. You have to disclose if there's been like a discharge of a firearm. You have to disclose if anybody's died in the home. Truth of the matter is, in the state of Indiana, it's not a disclosure that's required at all. Not only is it not required, but if the seller tells you they don't want you telling anybody, you're not even allowed to answer that question. Now, the truth of the matter is, I've been in a house before, and I'll tell my haunted house story here in a little bit too. I've been in a house before that we found out after the fact that supposedly the house was haunted, and like I said, I'll tell that story. It's an interesting one. But we were told, hey, if anybody asks you, I don't want you saying that. And in our profession, we have to adhere to the wishes of our client, which is the seller. And because it's psychological, even if I'm asked that question, hey, is this house haunted? Unfortunately, I can't answer that question. The seller's directed me not to, which in and of itself could be an answer.
You could read between the lines there.
Yeah. Jen Lush, if it is direct, you can't. No. You specifically are required not to disclose it if the seller tells you not to. It has nothing to do with the material condition of the property under Indiana law. So, a lot of people think, hey, if there has been somebody who died in the house, or there's been, unfortunately, suicide is something that can come up, or, bumps in the night, or creepy sounds. Those are all things that you are not allowed to disclose if the seller says, hey, I don't want you to tell anybody about this.
Now, what if the seller doesn't mention it and it comes up in casual conversation with a neighbor? Say, hey, we're interested in this house, and it comes up. What's the obligation there?
Yeah, so the obligation, and that's a great question, one that most people don't even think about. The casual conversation you might have with another person who knows the property or has heard rumors about the property or anything else, like, hey, I heard this house was haunted. What do you know about that? Technically, at that point in time, you should say, hey, I don't know anything about that, unless you physically know and have been told and there's a thing, and the seller has said, do whatever you want, I don't care. Your obligation is non-existent to disclose anything like that, especially if you hear it from like a neighbor or anything else like that, because even if it's a material condition of the property and it's not a psychological impact, if you're hearing it from a neighbor, that is just considered hearsay.
Okay.
Now, if there's something that comes up that's specific, like, hey, man, I heard that foundation at that house has got some problems, I'm going to go back to my seller and say, I've got people out there who are saying there are potential serious issues with the property. Maybe we need to get somebody out here to take a look at it. That's my job. That's my responsibility. If I'm hearing those kind of things that I know could affect the next buyer of the property, I want to make sure that I'm getting out there and getting ahead of that situation before it becomes a problem. When it's psychological like that, I really don't have any of that kind of obligation.
So you don't. I think I'm hearing you right. But so when we take a buyer to their property, we really have no course of action if it's so-called haunted.
Correct. That is absolutely correct. Now, if I'm representing a buyer and I've had a ton of people tell me, hey, guess what? There's people saying that this house is haunted and stuff like that. I'm not going to necessarily bring that up to somebody, because some people are going to be weird about that whole situation. But I don't believe in ghosts. I don't believe in all that kind of stuff. I don't want to know anything about that. So I'm not bringing that up unless there's something that happens that leads me to believe they want me to have that conversation with them. It's not coming out of my mouth.
Okay.
But if there's something that's like, they've told me beforehand, hey, I don't want haunted houses. I don't want houses that people have died in or stuff like that. But, hey, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but I've heard this. I'd rather get out there ahead of it and let you know because you voiced this concern to me previously. Otherwise, I'm not bringing it up unless I know there's some kind of specific information that needs to be shared.
Right, and if it comes up, I'm sure we can get you in touch with a Ghostbuster.
Yeah, absolutely. My brother-in-law is a priest. We can have him come out and bless the house. I've actually offered that service to people before. Greg's laughing. That people actually do enjoy having that out, so I'm happy to help out with that. Darren Erfer, great question here. As a realtor on the buyer side, is there a search that you can run to find out about any death in the home?
That's a great question.
You can Google it. You can do a bunch of different research privately to try to figure that out, but there's not like a database that exists of people who died in their home. And a lot of times, not only that, there's actual specific protocol that some EMTs and some ambulance services and other things have, that they may go to the house, and if there's any kind of work that they continue to do on the person or the body as they're taking it to the hospital, they may not actually do the time of death until they get it to a place outside of the home. So there's nothing specific that we have that we can research to say, hey, is there a death in the home that's of record or anything like that? But there's nothing that can stop us from doing like searches to see if there's any news reports of any kind of like actual physical things that have happened in the property, like homicide or anything else like that. So great question. A lot of people think we have access to like a encyclopedia of all the history of the house, of everybody who's been there and died there.
The ghosts took them.
The truth is that it just doesn't exist. So we're kind of at the mercy of the due diligence that we can kind of pull up on our own. But great question.
All right, so Aaron, I'm going to throw one at you here. This has kind of been a pet peeve around the office today. This is kind of off track a little bit. So it's supposed to rain tomorrow. What's your opinion, Aaron? Are we when's trick or treat?
I remember when I was a kid.
Back in our day.
And when it rained, we had these crazy inventions. They might still have them. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're called umbrellas. So as far as I'm concerned, that's still an actual opportunity to go and trick or treat, even if it's raining. But hey, I'm also not going to discriminate against the families who want to stay out of the rain. If you're out and you're asking for candy tonight and my light's on, ring the bell, knock on the door, I'm going to let you get get in there. But if you're out tomorrow night, same situation. Adhere to the strict rules of safety when you're trick-or-treating. Wait and only go to the houses that have their porch lights on, who are actually welcoming in trick-or-treaters.
My opinion before we get to Jen, if you want that candy, you get in the rain. Anyway, Jen asked, what happened to the home Greg had an issue with?
Yeah, what did happen in the house?
The first week was several sleepless nights. I'm not going to lie. I remember when we were fixing up the upstairs, I had my bed downstairs, and I would lay all night just staring at the ceiling with my eyes wide open, and every little sound, it was wild. And then we got a dog, and our dog would always gravitate to this one spot in the living room where supposedly it happened, so that didn't help.
How long did you live in the house?
We lived in the house for 3 years, and when we closed on the house...
Full disclosure, I didn't sell this house.
Yeah, he didn't sell this.
This was a different house.
And so we closed on the house, we handed over the keys to the new owner, and on the way out, he's like, oh, by the way, nothing ever happened in the house that might spook me, would it? And I just looked at him and said, well, there is that. And just walked out. I answered the question. All right, so...
And he legally answered the question based upon what is required in the state of Indiana. Mark Lush, got to say, quick shout out to the trick-or-treating and 2 feet of snow and liking it. When did you have 2 feet of snow in October? You're from Central Illinois. I don't know that I believe that one, but, I'm going to let that one stand.
Okay, and now Liz Bays here. Is this a Bays? That's right.
Yeah, this is Liz Bays.
She wants to hear Aaron's story.
So this story, this is a funny story, actually. This takes you back to Aaron's early career in real estate. We actually, the previous team that I was on, we had a property listed that we sold, and maybe a year and a half later, that property happened to come back on the market. We thought, that's a little odd. We don't understand. Unfortunately, that family had ended up getting a divorce. There were just several things that happened. Like, oh, that makes sense that it's going to be back on the market at this time. Well, my team leader at the time went and actually showed the home, and the lady who owned the home said, we got to get out of this house. It's haunted. I don't know if you know this, but I can see spirits. Or excuse me, this is the lady who was looking at the house. She said, I can see spirits. I don't know if you know that, but there's actually a graveyard out there, and pointed out the kitchen window out past the backyard of the house. Anita kind of laughed it off, the team lead, continued with the showing, everything else, then found out that the seller was actually saying, yeah, that's the reason we're selling the house. It's haunted. We hate it here. We got to get out of this house. So we went back to the actual owner of the house who owned it previously, kind of laughing about the story. Like, oh my gosh, can you believe that these people think that house is haunted? And stone face, she was like, yeah, it is. That's actually why we sold it. And it was like, okay, well, that's interesting. And we're like, well, tell us about it. What makes you think it was haunted? She's like, well, when you enter in the front door and there's that big long hallway that you go through. She's like, that actually was a false wall that we built because we wanted to change the rotation of where we sat in the living room so we could watch down the hallway. Because we'd always hear noises or see shadows, and we just wanted to make sure that we got out ahead of it and made sure nobody was actually in our house. And I'm kind of thinking about it, and I'm like, wait a minute. And I thought back, because years ago, I'd actually done an open house at that particular property. And I remember that the day I was out there, I was on the phone, nobody was coming out. It was kind of a dreary day, but it was not so bad. Just not a whole lot of traffic at the open house. That day happens all the time, not that atypical. So I pulled out my cell phone, I was talking to the girl I was dating at the time, and I heard somebody walking down the hall. I'm like, oh, hey, I gotta let you go. Somebody came in the house. Didn't hear him pull up. Sorry, gotta let you go. So I'm like, hey, my name's Aaron. I'm over here in the kitchen. Walk out into the living room.
Wait for it.
Nobody's there. Nobody's there. And I'm like, oh, no big deal. People walk around. They're checking stuff out. I'll go see. So I walk down the hallway and I look in all the bedrooms. Nobody's there. So I'm like, okay, well, let me go back and I'll go out the front door and maybe they walk back outside. They'll walk around the house. There's not even another car at the property. The door has never been opened. Nobody was ever there. And in my mind at the time, I must have heard something. Maybe it was just the floor creaking. But you couple that with the fact that I've had 2 people who have owned that house who came back and said, oh yeah, no, 100% that house is haunted. It still gives me chills just thinking about that one. So, careful, you're scared, Greg. But so, yeah, there's definitely... in this industry, there's going to be houses that are going to have stories, they're going to have
Right.
noises, they're going to be that kind of stuff. Haunted houses are just the name of the game, and everybody wants to talk about it, especially in an area where we have homes that were built in the 50s, 40s, 30s. I've sold a home that was built in the late 1800s. There's plenty of history in these houses, and people want to know about it, and it's just one of those topics that everybody wants to talk about.
Yeah, and if you ever get to a point where you want to do a paranormal investigation, believe it or not, I got a guy.
He does
I
have
got
a
a
guy.
guy. So they're a lot of fun. And I know we digress a little bit. We're just having some fun with the holiday season. Well, Halloween coming up tomorrow or today, depending on where you're at. But let's just keep it short and simple. Aaron, what do our listeners need to know about psychologically affected properties?
The big important thing that you need to take away is in the state of Indiana, psychological impacts are just that. They are psychological things. They're not necessarily anything that is a material condition of the property. They're not anything that's going to have an effect necessarily on the value of the property.
Right.
Could be perceived value based upon someone else and their thoughts about it, but not an actual valuation issue that we can point to say, hey, this is going to have an impact on what your home's going to sell for. And not only that, there are things that a lot of people may come back later on and say, hey, you never told me about these things. Right. Ultimately, they are not required disclosures. And not only that, we have to adhere to what our sellers tell us or don't tell us, and we have to make sure that we are listening to what they have to say. Right. So that's the big takeaway on haunted houses and psychologically impacted properties. The disclosure laws may not be what you're expecting.
Right. And feel free to comment below once we post a video. We'd love to hear your stories. Always up for a good ghost story.
Yes, so if you have any haunted house stories, as he's saying, put them in the comments down below. We're going to share this video. We're going to make sure that it stays out there for everybody to see, so I'd love to read them. To Jen Lush, I never said I don't believe in ghosts. I said I've had people tell me they don't believe in ghosts. I'll be quite honest with you. I've seen things and I've heard things that I can't explain, so it does not surprise me if they do exist.
I did a paranormal investigation of the old Charleston jail this summer, and let me tell you, I believe in ghosts.
So, thanks for checking out this episode of Real Talk Real Estate, episode number 43. We're going to keep going live at this time for a while, so if you enjoyed seeing us Tuesdays at 1:30, let us know in the comments down below. If there's a better time you would rather check us out, let us know that too. If there's any topic you ever want to hear about, any questions you have about the real estate industry or the transaction process or anything else, you can give us a shout here on Facebook or give me a call, 812-779-6273.
Or 812-454-8103.
And we will make sure to get back to you. Thanks again for always checking us out. Make sure you like this video. Share it with anybody you know who's actually worried about haunted houses, because they may want to know that the questions they ask may not have an answer.
Happy Halloween, guys.
Happy Halloween.